First thing I would say is that this forum here is a phenomenal opportunity for education. And I don't hesitate to say that had I heard some of the things that Elizabeth and Barbara shared this morning or this afternoon in London, uh, on our outset on the journey of working with a Prader-Willi child, I think things might have been very different for us. At the same time, I think one of the challenges we faced initially was that we're presented with certain information. Our daughter was born in 1998, when there wasn't a lot of awareness in Canada at that point, to the same extent it is today, about Prader-Willi and all the various challenges that those kids can face. I would say that the opportunity we had to learn as we went along and not be subject to a conventional or static understanding of what a Prader-Willi syndrome person is, but learning as your child develops at whatever pace and to whatever extent, and learning how to cope with the various situations that arise. So a lot of what we heard from Barbara and Elizabeth are certainly have been relevant for our daughter as well. I would say that we found out only at age 4.5, uh, and perhaps didn't have the opportunity that some kids today have with various help and support. And with regards to, Cathy, go to the next slide. We found, and I mentioned these things here as well, that everything our daughter does, in addition to school, is part of a part of a life plan, and we have adopted, as I imagine many do, a holistic approach of how to cope with various issues because they're similar, whether it's in an arts and crafts class, next slide, Cathy, or whether it's in school, or whether it's how they dress and how they see themselves. And it's often not. This is really due to the instigation of Ela's mother with regards to fashion. Next slide, please. But physical activity as well. Being somebody who was athletically inclined for many years, we impress our own expectations on a child who may not have the ability to reach those expectations that we have for them. But at the same time, that's a balance we've dealt with, I think, over the years with Ela, trying to find where we can push her to whatever extent within reason. Sometimes we go beyond that, of course, in terms of what we think she can do, but not to be uh, stuck in a place where this is a Prader-Willi child, this is what they're capable of, and lower your expectations accordingly. So that's the biggest piece of advice I would give. As was mentioned before, there's such a range within the spectrum of somebody who has Prader-Willi syndrome that you have to constantly try to find where you can allow your child to reach their greatest potential. And so all these activities that AI does, we take the same approach with those as we do to school, whether it's controlling access to food, whether it's supporting them when things are challenging in terms of the social interactions with others who may be participating in those activities. And that's kind of guided us in all realms of Ela's life. Next slide, Cathy. And we're fortunate that Ela's found a passion. She loves animals, and I'll talk in a moment, very, very briefly, about her education and how to relate and interact with animals. Last slide, Cathy. So, in a nutshell, much of what I plan to say has been mentioned by Elizabeth and Barbara already, but I just want to share a couple of things that would be relevant with our specific experience. Number one, the issue of assessments, educational, psychological, skill testing is crucial. When you go to a school, you need to have those elements there because only with that legitimate assessment of your child is the school going to be able and see itself being as facilitating and collaborative as possible in answering your child's very specific needs. The other thing is, with regards to our experience, we went a route with private and public schools. Initially, for financial reasons, we tried a public school at a young age for Ela. There were challenges there, and as was said, kids usually tend to be okay at that stage, and some of the later challenges with social interaction and academic achievement don't really pop up at that early age to the same extent as they do later on. What we did find is that in terms of legitimizing a parent's concerns, if you can find a way to get involved in the school, it shows that you're not just concerned about your own kid. And Ela's mother, to her great credit, in the school's initiative was to try to bring parents in to help and run activities because they simply didn't have the staffing available. So Ela's mother, Iris, came and did an activity, not just for Ela, but for kids who were interested in doing something during recess. She taught them knitting. And you might think, oh, that's not a very appealing thing, but it was. There were 15 kids in the class, and it allowed Ela the opportunity to interact with her peers in a place where she would be comfortable doing something else and because it was a challenge in other activities within the school. And that also gave Iris legitimacy in the school to advocate for other needs that Ayla has, together with others who have special needs. So that's one element of if you don't have a Prader-Willi professional, or in addition to that, establish a standing in the school as a parent where you're contributing to the school, and then you can also advocate on behalf of your child's needs. We went to private schools afterwards, a place for grades 6 to 8 where Ela was among, I would say, elite kids, where you might think that's not her place whatsoever, academically or socially. And there were great challenges with that school, but we were fortunate there to find teachers who really cared. And part of what was explained before about having to go in, spend time with those teachers, explain your child's needs, whether graphically or verbally or whatever, that shows that you're not just throwing a child with challenges at a school and expecting them to deal with it. You care, you're willing to be involved. We were in regular discussion with those fantastic educators, and they made sure that Ayla's stay there was a very positive and effective one, both academically as much as it could be socially. Um, One other element that I'd mentioned is we took a year off after that grade 8 and sent Ayla to a place called the Aerosmith School, not to be mixed up with the rock band, of course. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Aerosmith program. It's a cognitive training program based on neuroplasticity to address learning disabilities. And sometimes we think of our Prader-Willi children as having been given this genetic blueprint, and that's what they're stuck with. But we found, and I would say in Ela's words, because I asked her what she thought of that experience, she said, after that year at Aerosmith, I had better awareness, my science grades dramatically improved, and muscle memory became average, whereas before it was below average. Those are in Ela's words, our daughter's words. Lastly, the high school she went to, and Cathy will talk more about this as well, uh, we went back to a public school system, a unique school in Toronto that is geared for girls only and is geared for those who have all sorts of variety of challenges. We found there fantastic staff, administrative educators who saw Ela's needs and answered that in an effective way. I haven't spoken much about uh, issues with food because all the schools we came into contact with the exception of the first school, the first public school at a younger age, we found people there who were willing to go the distance to make sure that we mitigated or lessened any opportunity for Ela to seek out food. And as you heard, and as your own experience demonstrates, when you eliminate anxiety and potential to access food in an improper way, you greatly increase their ability to focus, to concentrate on those things which are going to be to their benefit and which will allow them to contribute to the school population. And as you mentioned, Ayla had a great relationship with the teachers, sometimes not so great with the students because that's the nature of things. And I would just summarize what Ayla said about her experience at this wonderful high school, Hayden Park. All teachers knew about my PWS and they were passively supervising. So she knew that they were there all the time and providing their support and lessening the opportunity to do things that she shouldn't be doing. Last thing, I know I'm going a little over time. you can take more of the last 5 minutes, Kathy. Um, we Part of what they did at Hayden Park was allowed her to take courses that would enable her to continue with some kind of college program afterwards. And we found night courses, summer courses. We're so fortunate that Ayla is academically oriented. She went to a college and studied to become a veterinary technician. We never thought she'd get in. We never thought or dreamt that she would actually finish the program, which she did. But because that college, in light of significant advocacy and discussions with staff, administration, and educators there, they made all sorts of accommodations, which they have a framework for, but special accommodations for Ayla's food issues. You're not allowed to take food into exams. They allowed her to bring food when she was writing the exam. They're not allowed to bring anything but water. Part of Ayla's challenges are narcolepsy. So she drinks coffee. They allowed her to bring coffee into those exams. So I mention all these elements because if you have the courage and the commitment and the strength and the emotional resources to advocate for your child with any of these educational institutions you may choose that seem to fit her needs best, you can always, I found, better her situation and her potential for getting the most out of that educational experience. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Cathy. Michael and I actually live near one another in Toronto, Canada. And my daughter, tell you a little bit about her. Her name is Rebecca. She is now 31 years old. And you can see here, this was when she was about 10 years old. She actually got a prize at the school for being the Yes, I Can kid. So that it was about her enthusiasm for school and for the community. And we were very proud of her. She was diagnosed at about 15 months, UPD. You could see she was very, very small from the ICU, very small and very floppy, very typical Prader-Willi. She sat up at around 2 years old, so a lot of, or in the early years, a lot of physiotherapy and occupational therapy, speech therapy. At 5 years old, she had just begun to walk when she was around 3 or 4, and very proud to go off to school. And then you can see at 21, she did graduate from high school, not with an academic a diploma, but with a certificate that she had completed the years of school. And here in Ontario, the state in Canada, you can stay in school until you're 21. So while many students graduate earlier academically, with disabilities, she was able to stay till she was 21 years old. And so her journey, when we think about Rebecca, and I can see, thank you for sharing the ages of your children and where you're from. Um, different things at different times, but we always thought of Rebecca as, part of our family, not just Rebecca with Prader-Willi, but Rebecca as a person and all of the different aspects of who she is and what's important to her and what's important to us. So she has an older sister. This is now an older picture, but a mother and a father. We always did everything we could to give her as strong an academic background as appropriate for her. But also, what are her interests and passions? She likes music. She likes to be social. She likes to dance. She likes animals. How can we accommodate those for her in school and out of school? What kinds of supports and accommodations and entitlements does she need and is she entitled to? And I know that we are from all over the world and different places have different approaches to education and to what people are entitled to and to what's required and to what's provided. But really important as a parent, wherever you are, what are you entitled to? What are some of the supports that are required, and how can you advocate for them? Location was important. So again, I can see from the chat and from families asking about different aspects. For us, it was important that it was nearby. We thought it was important for her to be part of her community and not away from our home and not spend a lot of time away. But that may be difficult for you, and the right situation may be something that where she has to be your child may need to be on a bus or spend a lot of time getting to and from school, but something to think about. The physical and health and activity, right? What was going to be a healthy place for her? And I think we've talked, and thank you to the professionals talking about the health concerns with somebody with Prader-Willi. And I would say, really, the social and the emotional and psychological, we've all said it, is really critical. Who is she as a person and what is going to help her be most successful in her life? And you have to think of your child as a whole person in the context of your family and in your community and in the world. Somebody is asking the city, I'm in Toronto, Canada. So again, I much of repeating much of what's been said. In the early years, until she was about 12 years old, till adolescence, she was in a wonderful school not far from where we live, and she was in a special program for students with intellectual disabilities. So that classroom had about 12 children, 12 students, a teacher, and an assistant. And they were in the school. They did many of the activities in the broader school, but we felt that she was best supported being in this smaller classroom with other children with disabilities. She was the only person with Prader-Willi syndrome. So we did have to, work hard with the school to educate about things like food in the classroom, what to do at treats and birthday parties. And we always planned those in advance. We always wanted her to be part of those celebrations, but we planned for them. So we adjust the food at different times. We make sure that the portions are appropriate, but that she would be included and part of things like celebrations. You can see she was part of music. She was very, in most of the pictures, as we've been talking about, she's next to an adult. Yes, she always loved to be next to the teacher, next to the assistant, but with other children. And I would repeat what the others have said. That is typical. And we do the best we can to try and socialize, not only in the school, but in the neighborhood, in our community. And in the school, if the teachers and the aides are supportive, they can help facilitate and support interaction with the other children. It is a lot easier, we found, in those years when Rebecca was younger, to integrate, because it does get more difficult when she went to high school. High school is when in her teenage years, transportation on a bus, going to the school dance with, this is our next door neighbor, with the boy next door. She took him to the special big dance at the end of the year. Being with friends, but she always had an aide with her. You can see she's walking down the hall with one of the assistants. She was in a small class, again, in a protected environment, but we did start to see for the first time when she was around 11, 12 years old, food seeking became a big issue, weight gain became a big issue. In the high school with other teenagers, there's always food around, there's more independence, there's more challenges. So she did not eat in the cafeteria with other students. She ate in a classroom separately. But again, the social and emotional was as important as the academic. And so she got a certificate of completion, not an academic diploma. But we think that we were able to provide her with a happy experience, with a social experience, with a full experience. We did a lot of training with the school on Prader-Willi. We had from our local association. I know a shout out to Jen Cohens, who is from the Ontario Prader-Willi Syndrome Association, came to the school. We had a nutritionist who came and actually did a session with the kids in the school about nutrition and helping Rebecca. The best way to help her is by not sharing food, right? Which is a really hard thing for kids to know, but they began to understand her more. And we also were very, very involved in the school as parents. We did a lot of volunteer work and did a lot of things with the school community, so that Rebecca was not just that kid with special needs. She was part of the school community. And I'm proud to say that today Rebecca lives in a home for people with Prader-Willi syndrome, and she has a very full and active life. She does Special Olympics. She does a drama program. She goes to summer camp and enjoys therapeutic horseback riding. She travels with us. She donated blood. She's an active, happy, successful person. And as Michael was saying, our goal as parents was how can we prepare her best for her whole life, not just one aspect. And we're very, very proud of her. So to summarize, Michael and I are going to do this quickly together, and I think these are uh, things that have already been brought up. So we'll go through them very
If you could
quickly.
just, yeah, shame, thanks. If you can go
Yep.
quickly.
Yep.
Thanks.
No, understand your child. Really, really look at your child. What are they good at? What are some of the things they need? What are the supports they have? Understand what they're entitled to, what they are entitled to legally, and what's available to them. And really, the more research that you can do, the more you can advocate for what your child needs. Collaborate, educate, communicate. And we've all been talking about that. And whether there are resources available in your local community and language, or there are international opportunities, the communication. Create a plan that everybody knows and be consistent with routines, with food, with behavior strategies. Bring your child in and prepare them for success. Help them understand where is the school, go for visits, role play so they can understand how not be surprised when they get there. Get involved with your local community and with other families and adapt because things will change. They always do. And be open to adapting as things do change and as your child gets older and as the situation changes. So that's it from me.
Thanks so much to you, Kathy and Michael. That was some really great tips and inspiration for parents.